When we look in the mirror, what do we see? Do we see someone who's got it all together? Or someone who always seems to drop the ball? Or perhaps some combination? Perhaps we avoid looking in the mirror at all because we don't want to see anything. What we see when we look at ourselves is critically important to our health and well-being, both physically and spiritually. What we choose to see is key. Well, the writer of Lamentations in chapter 3 verses 19 and 20 shares, "Just thinking of my troubles and my lonely wandering makes me miserable. That's all I ever think about, and I'm depressed." Well, do we dwell on our failures, our fears, our resentments, our anger? When we do, what does Lamentations say about the result? Do we end up miserable and depressed? Often I think we feel overwhelmed when we start to look at our lives, and we choose not to look any deeper. We get ourselves busy with something to distract us. Perhaps work or helping others, or we turn to chemicals or booze to numb ourselves. Whatever escape we use, it allows us not to look at the reality of our situation and instead put up a mask to hide behind. We've been looking at the story of the prodigal son in this series. Remember, he'd taken all of his money and moved away, then blew it all and ended up feeding pigs for a living. I bet he didn't like looking in the mirror when he came home from work. I doubt it was a sudden switch that happened though. I don't think he went from liking what he saw one day to not wanting to look the next. Well, Luke chapter 15, verse 14 tells the chain of events like this. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout the country, and he began to be in need. Well, he didn't become destitute overnight, though. He had to have seen his bank account getting lower and lower. And famines don't happen overnight. They're usually the result of a failed crop season. And finally, Luke tells us that he began to be in need, so he went and got himself a job. Well, all of these things take time. Well, the prodigal son had plenty of time to look in the mirror while this was going on. So why did he let it happen? Why didn't he take steps to change things? Well, we have an amazing ability to deceive ourselves. I bet he looked in the mirror, and when he saw something he didn't like, he partied harder to distract himself. He satisfied himself with just glimpses, refusing to focus on what he saw there. He told himself the lie, "It's not that bad," enough times that he started to believe it himself. I bet he didn't want anyone else to know what was going on either. So he put up a mask for others that said, "Hey, life's great. Everything's fine here." Now we don't do that, do we? I bet if we're honest, we do. I bet if we're honest and consider the passage from Lamentations, we know that just thinking about our troubles can make us miserable. So we often refuse to focus on them, and we look the other way. We recognize as well that as we continue to ignore them, they simply grow bigger, consume our attention, and lead us into depression. Verses 17 and 18 of the prodigal son story read, "But when he came to himself, he said, 'How many of my father's hands have bread enough to spare, and more? And here I am, dying of hunger. I will get up and go to my father. I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you.'" When he came to himself, what do you think that means? Did a light bulb suddenly come on? Or in his case, a candle? Well, yeah. I think he finally grabbed that mirror with both hands, and as difficult as it was, forced himself to look and focus on what he was really seeing. He made a conscious decision to take down that mask, to stop hiding, and to take stock of what was really going on. Now, did he like what he saw? No. But by truly looking at his situation, by admitting that he'd blown the money, by recognizing that he was dying of starvation, by acknowledging that he betrayed his father, it led him to a place where he could also see that he had a father who was a good master to his servants, that could be counted on to provide if the son would just do his part. Now, by no means did this new sight show that the road ahead was going to be an easy one. The son still had to humble himself and return to the father. He had to live a life of serving. That's what he had to look forward to. But at least there was a light ahead of him, a future that promised to be far better than his current one. Now that's something we can draw from this story and apply to our lives. When we're willing to stop, to truly examine and take stock of our lives, our actions, our motivations, we stop deceiving ourselves and we can see the road ahead much clearer. We don't have to be overwhelmed, face depression, and busy ourselves anymore. We drop our masks and start to deal with things and move past them. Instead of just surviving, we start to live. And the greater news in all this is that we're not alone in it. We too, like the prodigal son, have a father that is a good master. Like the end of the story, our Heavenly Father wants us to live, and live abundantly. He wants to help us see ourselves as He does, as His children, loved by the Creator of the universe. Now, the writer of Lamentations, in the verses following the one I read earlier, tells us this. The Lord's kindness never fails. If He had not been merciful, we would have been destroyed. The Lord can always be counted on to show mercy each morning. Deep in my heart, I say, the Lord is all I need. I can depend on Him. Now that's my prayer today, that we all, each of us, have the courage to look in the mirror, to recognize the good, the bad, and the ugly, and know that our Father loves us and wants to be beside us as we walk down the road ahead. Have a great week, and God bless.
Escape the wheel.